Hello and welcome to this frequently requested and well overdue Rogues Gallery. Yes, I finally get to look at the enemies of one of my favourite comic book characters, being the Hulk. As always, I will discuss some of the protagonist's most notorious enemies whilst exhibiting what I think is the best artwork depicting each character. It is difficult to comprehend who or what could rival such a hulking hero, but there are many villains in the Green Goliath's Rogues Gallery that can match him for size, so let's begin with a real heavyweight in the Abomination. Former Yugoslavian spy Emil Blonsky would infiltrate the US Air Force and discover Bruce Banner's gamma radiation equipment. Upon testing it on himself, Blonsky became the monstrous Abomination. After several fights with the Hulk, Abomination would retreat to the New York sewers, where he developed a jealousy towards Banner's happiness. As a result, he poisoned Bruce Banner's wife Betty before being brought to justice by the Hulk, who imprisoned him in a military installation. Another brute that can go head to head with the Jade Giant is Rhino. Despite being more of a Spider-Man villain, Rhino has clashed with the Hulk on several occasions. Due to his limited intelligence, Alex O'Hearn was used as a test subject by a group of spies who gave him numerous chemical and radiation treatments. These experiments gave him superhuman strength, as well as a near invulnerable exoskeletal suit which resembled the hide of a rhinoceros. These abilities would serve him well in his encounters with the Hulk. Our next heavyweight is as big or even bigger than the Hulk because he is the Juggernaut. Although he is more commonly an X-Man villain, Juggernaut has run into the Hulk on several occasions. During his time in the army, Kane Marco would find a temple within a Korean cave where he discovered a large ruby. This magically transformed him into a human Juggernaut, and he would subsequently use these powers to battle the X-Men and the Hulk. Another towering adversary of the Jade Giant is the Wendigo. The legend of an ancient curse tells that anyone who should consume human flesh within the Canadian wilderness will become a Wendigo. This is exactly what happened to hunter Paul Cartier, who transformed into the savage beast after he was forced to cannibalize in order to survive. In an attempt to cure himself, Cartier tried to transfer the curse onto the Hulk, however his hunting companion George Baptiste became the new Wendigo instead. Perhaps matching strength with a being like the Hulk is not the best approach when battling the Green Goliath. As a result, Banner's alter ego has attracted some brainy adversaries who use their heads when battling the beast. School dropout Samuel Stearns accepted a job in a US government research facility where an accident saw his body absorb intense gamma radiation. This led to his augmented intelligence and cranium. Disgusted by government corruption, Stern decided that he should lead the human race and thus became known as the Leader. This villain has used his brain to combat the Hulk's brawn on several occasions and has often used robotic humanoids and superhumans to assist him in these encounters. Another villain who used brains over brawn when battling the Hulk was the Gargoyle. As one of the earliest enemies of the Hulk, I had to include the Gargoyle. Soviet scientist Yuri Topolov was working with radiation at a Russian missile site which caused his mutation. Although he was physically deformed, he was mentally enhanced to genius levels of intellect. The Gargoyle would become obsessed with the Hulk and used a special gun designed to sap its victim's will to render him unconscious. When he brought the Hulk to Russia as a symbol of his power, the Green Goliath reverted back to his banner form, which enraged the Gargoyle. Our next master of mental warfare is the villain known as Bi-Beast. Originally created to serve as the guardian of the avian race, the android Bi-Beast patrolled the Silent Sky Island. However, after years of solitude, Bi-Beast would become unstable and kidnap Betty Ross, who he had transformed into the winged monster called the Harpy. This would result in a savage encounter between Bi-Beast and the Hulk, which ended when Banner cured Betty's condition. Continuing with the theme of cerebral assassins, we move on to the villain named Modok. George Tarleton was mutated by his employers at the Advanced Idea Mechanics organization. The bioengineers would mutate him into a living computer called Modok, which was short for mental organism designed only for killing. In a twist of fate, however, Modok would betray his creators and take control of AIM. With aspirations for world domination, Modok came into conflict with the Green Goliath, amongst other members of Earth's mightiest heroes. Our next villain is titanic in terms of both brawn and brains, because he is the Titan known as Xemnu. This one-time ruler of his native world still remains a very real threat to humanity. Upon discovering that his planet had been devastated by a plague, Xemnu travelled back to Earth where he felt most at home. Whilst there, he tried to transform people into members of his own race, but was stopped by the Hulk. Perhaps Banner's original enemy is the one responsible for the mental trauma that eventually created the Hulk. This is none other than his own father, Dr. Brian Banner. Arguably the Hulk's first real enemy was his own father, Dr. Brian Banner. Whilst this atomic physicist was working for the US government, he feared that he had been exposed to trace amounts of radiation, which would in turn affect his unborn son Bruce. Dr. Banner would eventually turn to drink, exacerbating his fits of rage, which saw him accidentally kill his own wife and end up in a mental institution. Bruce would forever be affected by this early trauma. Now to some villains who have more energy-based abilities, and we will begin with the Absorbing Man. Originally intended to fight with Thor, Loki endowed Crusher Creel with property-absorbing powers via physical contact. The Absorbing Man would use these powers to use the Hulk's strength against him on numerous occasions. It is no shocker that our next villain is on the list, because he is the being known as Zax. The living electromagnetic field known as Zax came into existence after a strange accident at a consolidated Edison nuclear power plant. Zax would absorb the electromagnetic brainwave energies of its victims and thus gain a degree of sentience before shaping itself into a crude humanoid form. Zax has proven a worthy foe for the Jade Giant, and it is able to grow in size by draining energy from its surroundings. When a rage monster goes on a rampage for our most populated cities, you would expect the army to become involved. Therefore, it is no surprise that the Hulk's Rogues Gallery comprises of many military-based enemies. Glenn Talbot was made head of security by Thunderbolt Ross for Desert Base in order to investigate Dr. Bruce Banner. To complicate things further, he also became involved in a love triangle as he fought Banner for the affections of Ross's daughter Betty. Subsequently, he would discover that the Hulk was indeed Banner's alter ego and would work with Thunderbolt Ross to destroy the beast. Despite marrying Betty, she would eventually divorce him as she realised that she still loved Bruce. Unfortunately, things would get worse for Talbot as he was killed whilst battling the Green Goliath. As the officer in charge of the experiment that transformed Bruce Banner into the Hulk, General Ross felt responsible for capturing the beast by any means necessary. However, this responsibility would turn into an obsession as he would resort to drastic measures such as possessing the electrical form of Zax. Ross would always strike like a thunderbolt when heading into battle against his foe. Although our next villain does not belong to any militia of Earth, he still is a military strategist who possesses his own army. After his warlord father and saviour of planet Sakaar died, Angmo II ascended to the throne and adopted the alias of Red King. This vain and childlike leader pursued power and glory at any cost and even assassinated his own sons and daughters to ensure that this title would not be usurped. However, when the Hulk was accidentally exiled to their world, he would initially gain notoriety as the gladiator Green Scar, named after a mythical figure who was prophesied to rule and heal the planet. Growing concerned at his popularity, the Red King tried to have the Hulk killed on numerous occasions. Ultimately, the Red King would fight the Hulk in a one-on-one encounter, but was defeated. It is incredibly difficult to match strength with the strongest one there is, so it is no surprise that many have adopted the strength in numbers approach when battling the Hulk. In an attempt to duplicate the process by which the Fantastic Four obtained their powers, millionaire Simon Utrecht enlisted rocket pilot Mike Steele, engineer Jimmy Darnell, and technical specialist Ann Darnell to accompany him to space. The experiment was successful, and each member of the group found themselves with a new power as they formed their own team called the UFOs. Of course, their initial enemy was Bruce Banner, who they blamed for grounding their test flight prematurely. They would therefore test their new powers on Banner, but were unable to fully control them and suffered a devastating defeat once Banner turned into the Hulk. Our next group that teamed up against the Hulk was the Illuminati. After the Hulk destroyed Las Vegas, the Illuminati decided to shoot him into space to avoid future rampages. Despite this, the Hulk did not land on the selected uninhabited planet, but on Sakaar, where he became a gladiator and eventually freed the enslaved people. Unfortunately, the shuttle that he arrived on detonated, destroying his capital city and killing his new wife and unborn child. Blaming the Illuminati, the Hulk returned to Earth to begin all-out war. Despite this epic battle, the Illuminati were proven to be innocent regarding the destruction of Sakaar, which was actually perpetrated by the Red King's forces. Perhaps many of the Hulk's enemies have adopted the if you can't beat them, join them approach because our next two villains are actually versions of the Hulk. Approximately 100 years into the future in an alternate timeline, another version of the Hulk exists. After a nuclear war, the one known as the Maestro would rise to power. This version of the Jade Giant combines Banner's intelligence with the Hulk's strength and more sinister nature. Eventually, Professor Hulk was brought in to combat Maestro but was defeated in every encounter. However, the Maestro was eventually defeated when Doom's time machine sent him back to the exact time and place of the Hulk's creation. Ultimately, Maestro was seemingly killed in the same moment that the Hulk was created. Despite this, the Maestro would rebuild himself in order to face the Hulk again in the future. We all know the Hulk as an angry green monster, however our next version of this Goliath goes red with rage. He is aptly named the Red Hulk. After a battle with the Green Goliath during the events of World War Hulk, General Ross was turned into the Red Hulk by the leader, Doc Samson, and Modok. This red-skinned savage had similar proportions and strength to that of the Hulk's, but could transform between forms at will. Inevitably, the two Hulks would clash with them besting each other before the Green Hulk prevailed when his red counterpart overheated. Well, that brings us to an end of this exhibition of the Hulk's greatest enemies. I hope that I listed most of your favourites, but I cannot possibly mention them all, otherwise this video would be incredibly long. This was Schizofenik, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Take care.